voluntary activation of the sympathetic nervous system and attenuation of the innate immune response in humans. So the nervous system can be broken down into two major parts, the peripheral and the central nervous system. So the central nervous system is, of course, the brain and the spinal cord. And the peripheral nervous system is all the nerves that stem from the spinal cord and extend to our limbs, to the ends of our body, to our skin and fingertip, and so on. Now, the peripheral nervous system can be further subdivided into the somatic and the autonomic. The somatic, you can think of it, is all the things that help control external actions such as our muscles. So anytime you're reaching for any sort of object in life or you're moving or anything like that, all those actions are controlled by the somatic nervous system. The autonomic nervous system, those are the nerves that control all the internal activities of our body, all the things that are going on in the organs and glands. So that's called autonomic nervous system because, as you can imagine, it's very unlikely for you to be consciously be in control of those things. Those are automatically under control. So that's the autonomic nervous system. And then we can further subdivide the autonomic nervous system into two categories, the sympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetic nervous system. These are commonly thought of as the fight and flight response, the sympathetic nervous system, fight and flight, and the rest and digest, the calming one, which is the parasympathetic nervous system. So let's go back to the title. And here we see, even though I just said the sympathetic nervous system is part of the autonomic nervous system, which is not usually under voluntary control, the title of this article says voluntary activation of the sympathetic nervous system. So that's already very interesting, something very new, something very different from what we already currently know. So it's saying that there's possibly a way to voluntarily activate the sympathetic nervous system, and that possibly this is associated with the attenuation, which is another word for decrease, of the innate immune response. So what is the innate immune response? So we can think of immunity belonging into two categories. There's innate immunity and there's adaptive immunity. The major differences between these two things are that in innate immunity, we have white blood cell types such as dendritic cells, neutrophils, macrophages, and natural killer cells. And these cell types kind of move all around the body, and they have the ability to either release these things called cytokines, which are depicted by these yellow dots in this image, or they also have the ability to phagocytose, which means kind of like eat any pathogens. They can basically consume, engulf something that shouldn't belong in your body, and then by engulfing it, then they can proceed with its destruction. So that would be the innate immunity. And then the adaptive immunity, there's also white blood cells involved, but there are different types. There's mainly B cells and T cells, and B cells are well known because they release high affinity antibodies towards pathogens, and then the T cells can help with that aspect of B cell proliferation, and they also release cytokines as well. And then the other major difference between these two is that innate immunity is not specific towards any pathogen, and it acts very quickly early on, whereas adaptive immunity is very specific towards a pathogen that it is able to bind, such as the antibodies, and this happens a little bit later. The response time is days, not hours, like the innate immunity. So again, let's go back to the title of the article. Now we're talking about attenuation of the innate immune response. So why would we want to reduce the innate immune response if we want to be able to fight an infection? The authors begin by stating that the innate immune system is crucial to our survival, but excessive or persistent pro-inflammatory cytokine production can result in tissue damage and organ injury, such as an autoimmune disease. So there you go. That gives you some idea as to why potentially having an attenuated or decreased innate immune response might be a beneficial thing. We don't want excessive or persistent pro-inflammatory responses by our immune system.